It's my pleasure to introduce Craig White today. And Craig, as you know, is President and CEO of the Philadelphia Gas Works. And he's also serves on the board of the Energy Association for Pennsylvania and is past chairman as well as former executive board member of the American Public Gas Association. So please give a nice, warm welcome, Craig White.
Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you, Mark. I'm all mic'd up here, so I thought maybe I'd give up the podium if that's okay. I thought I'd have to mention about birthdays because I turned 60 this year, and the only thing I think about are ailments. Because when I meet with my friends, it's all we talk about. We talk about, well, our knees are bothering us, our necks are bothering us, our stomachs are bothering us. So I'm trying to force myself not to do that going forward. That's been my New Year's resolution, to stay away from the old person talk. But certainly, happy birthday, Rabbi. I thought maybe I'd start out by just mentioning a few things, and this is what I'm kind of most proud of. My father started at Philadelphia Gas Works in 1938, and he and I overlapped 10 months, and I've been there for 37 years. So it's been kind of a family thing. I've known about the gas works since I was a kid, and quite frankly, we have a lot of employees that are third generation. Our union president, Keith Holmes, his grandfather even worked at the company back in the early 1900s. So the company's been around for 181 years, and we've, if you look at the history, it's like a sine curve of mismanagement, good management, mismanagement, government interference, and so forth. But we've been on a pretty good run here since about 2000 when we fell under the Public Utility Commission. And prior to that, all the regulation was done locally here by the Philadelphia Gas Commission. Now the Philadelphia Gas Commission is still in existence. They oversee our capital and operating budgets along with City Council. But of course, we also have the Public Utility Commission that looks at our rates and our customer service and our safety. So as Mark mentioned, we're the largest municipal gas company in the country. And you say to yourself, well, I didn't even know there were municipal gas companies. There's over 700 of them. After you get past the top 10, you're talking about entities that probably have less than 100,000 customers. And then once you get past, say, the top 25, you're talking about companies that might have 50 customers. So there are towns throughout America that have natural gas businesses that have to adhere to all the federal regulation and all the safety regulations, and they have maybe 50 to 100 customers. We, as was mentioned, we have about 500,000 customers. We serve Philadelphia proper, which is 134 square miles, and we have the preponderance of our revenues are from residential heating customers. So what makes us very unusual is we're the only utility that's a municipal but also regulated by a state regulation. In other words, the Public Utility Commission. You won't find that anywhere else in the country. We are the most highly regulated utility in the country. We have more people that can pick up the phone and tell me what to do than any place else. I think one of them's in this room too. Where's the councilman? Councilman Dunn, who's been a great advocate for the company, and I want to thank you. You know, it's kind of ironic. I walk into this room, and my ex-wife, who I still love dearly, her very close friend's brother, Jack, is here. And then a young lady comes up to see me, Nicole Porter, and my daughter used to babysit for Nicole, and we were neighbors 2 doors down, so it's a small world. It really is. And I felt very much at home when I came in, and it's really a pleasure to be here today. What I thought I'd do is give you a little bit of background and a little bit more about the company and what we're doing, and then take some questions, because I know there's some current events, and there may even be some folks in this room that have some great interest in some of the current events that are going on with PGW. And I'll leave the suspense until I get the question. But we certainly are a company that we're living with a lot of very old infrastructure. I mean, when you're 180 years old, we didn't have interstate pipelines providing natural gas to Philadelphia until the 1950s, and the conversions really happened in the 60s. Prior to that, we manufactured all of our natural gas. So there are manufactured gas plant sites throughout the city. As a matter of fact, the Arthur Ashe Tennis Center is built on an old manufactured gas plant site. We manufactured a lot of gas in the Port Richmond section of town, and right now we have a very large facility there which we store liquefied natural gas. We had the largest liquefied natural gas facility in the country when it was built in 1972. And what that facility has done is it's saved the citizens of Philadelphia a lot of money over the years. We also have a plant down in South Philadelphia. We call it our Pass Young plant. And it's smack in the middle of the old Sunoco refineries, which are now the Philadelphia Energy Solutions refineries. And we have 73-acre wedge right in between those two. So we're really part of the fabric of Philadelphia. It's interesting that the interstate pipelines that provide the natural gas to Philadelphia, or actually we transport it. We actually reserve space. This is the way you should think of it. We lease space in a pipe, and we buy from producers, people who actually drill for natural gas. We buy from those producers and we bring it up on that pipeline. Well, those pipelines were oil pipelines during World War II that were used to transport oil to avoid the U-boat attacks that were taking out a lot of our tankers. And if any of you are fishermen, a lot of the wrecks off of New Jersey are actually ships that were sunk by German U-boats during World War II that were, we avoided that largely, or we kept the war machine operational during that time with that interstate pipeline. And in the 50s, it was converted to a natural gas pipeline. Since that time, there's been many pipelines built, and if you saw a map of the United States with pipelines, it looks like a spaghetti of pipelines all over the map, particularly from the Texas, Louisiana, which was the primary producing region, up to the Northeast, which is the primary consuming region. Now we have what we call Marcellus shale gas, and Pennsylvania is the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. When you look at West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York's not doing any drilling, but in central, northern, and western Pennsylvania, we're drilling more natural gas than they ever anticipated. And that is a feature of hydraulic fracturing. They always had the ability to fracture rock. And years ago, what drillers would do is they'd bore a well, and they'd fracture at the base of that well. And they would extract all the natural gas that would come out of the cracks that they caused as a result of the fracturing. Now they have the ability to drill that same well and at different depths go horizontally in 360 degrees for miles. So you actually fracture the rock in great distances on a 360 degree basis at multiple depths. And these depths are usually thousands and thousands of feet below the water table. So there's a lot. I mean, I'm not on the producing side, but I've been to well sites, I've been to well pads, I've had it explained to me, I've seen it. I think it's really done professionally, as I believe most things are done in the natural gas industry. We have a lot of regulation. We have to do things the right way. I always tell our employees there's two tests that we look at. One's the front page of the Daily News test. Before you do something, ask yourself, do you want to be on the front page of the Daily News with that decision? Because if you answer that question incorrectly and you are on the front page of the Daily News, I guarantee you it's embarrassing and it's not going to work out well for you. The other thing we look at is we always try to do things that we recognize that if we make a mistake for a customer, customers don't interact with us every day. It may take us 10 years to get that customer's faith back in the company. I'll give you a perfect example. We had a situation at the Paulsboro refinery where there was a release, and it's typically a chemical called mercaptan. Mercaptan is what we inject in natural gas to make it smell like rotten eggs. And to give you an idea, a couple drops of mercaptan with the winds moving in the right direction and an overcast sky will result in half the city smelling like rotten eggs. So we're talking about a very strong chemical here. Well, Paulsboro had a problem the other week, and then subsequent to that, there was another problem with a propane release at, I believe, Philadelphia Water Department. The fact of the matter was, we got over 700 emergency calls on a Saturday night. Now, we have an emergency line, and we staff that line 24/7. And our business is a 24/7 business. We are on the job. We have folks on the street available to cover what we expect to be the peak demand at any one time. but we certainly don't expect 700 calls at one time. And the problem with that is we had people calling up thinking there's an emergency and PGW is not answering the phone. Well, that's unacceptable to me. We've got to come up with technology that allows people, because some of those calls were real emergency calls. Some of those calls were an emergency at a house that had nothing to do with that other call. So there are things like that that are very important to me from a customer satisfaction standpoint. I want to make sure that we do not blow it with our customers. We don't have situations where we're not showing up for appointments, or we're going back 3 times to fix the same appliance when you have a parts and labor plan. Those things are unacceptable, and those are the types of things that in a large company, you confront that. That means your training has to be up to speed. That means the things that you do, your basic blocking and tackling that the public sees, has to be on its game. And back in the early 2000s, when this company was hemorrhaging, we almost went to junk bond status. We're now a A- rated investment by Standard & Poor's. So when we issue debt, we're issuing it at a very low interest rate because we're a fairly good security at this point. But back in 2000, when gas prices were spiking in 2003, 2004 as a result of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, wiped out half the producing region. And of course, many of you may remember, but areas of, it wasn't just New Orleans that got wiped out. The Mobile Bay, where a lot of your natural gas is produced, and a lot of your stripping plants that allow that natural gas to be produced in such a way that it can be used in your home or in your business, were destroyed. And those are the types of things that this utility has had to confront. And what it did was it spiked prices, and at that time when prices spiked, our collection rate went south. And the collection rate went south because we weren't doing a lot of the things that basic collection blocking and tackling that you have to do. And we've righted that ship. We actually have a collection rate here that's as strong as PECO's collection rate in the city of Philadelphia for electric. Now, I will say, let me caveat that, we are the poorest city with a population over 1 million. Out of our 500,000 customers, 250,000 of those customers are at 250% of poverty or below. When you're at 150% of poverty, you're on our low income program. So we have a lot of customers. We've had as many as 85,000 customers on a low income program where they pay based upon their income, and the rest of the bill gets shifted to those who are not on that low income program. Well, you say to yourself, well, geez, how fair does that sound? A lot of the dollars are getting shifted from this group over to this group. Well, let me tell you, these folks really need our help, number one. Number two, if they get a bill they can afford to pay, they'll pay it. If people get a bill that's thousands of dollars, they're just going to say, hey, I just can't, I'm just not going to pay any of that. We get people on a bill that they can afford to pay, and we have to shift the remainder of that cost over to our remaining customers. We'd love to shift it statewide, but we can't. We're not able to do that. But the fact of the matter is, we have a lot of people in this city that need our help and are very poor. And we, as a municipal utility, we still follow the rules of the PUC just like every other utility, but no one in the state has the low-income population and the low-income demands that PGW has. Having said that, when we do our JD Power surveys, our most satisfied customers are our low-income customer. Now, they're not just satisfied because of the bill. They're satisfied because most of our phone calls come from low-income customers. So we have a call center that supports a lot of our low-income customers. But certainly, all of our customers are very important, and customer satisfaction is very important to us. Now, our largest drain at this point is our capital program. We, as I started to say a few minutes ago, we're 180 years old, and we have a lot of what they call old, antiquated pipe in the ground. It's cast iron. It's made out of cast iron. The term they use is brittle. If cast iron gets undermined by a water main leak, we got to get out and replace it because it's going to break. If cast iron gets impacted by movement in any way, for instance, we have an extremely cold winter, which we haven't had lately, but if the frost gets down in the ground, what happens is when that frost starts to melt, the ground heaves and the pipes will break. And when it breaks, that's when dangerous situations can really occur. Our pipes are closest to the front foundation wall of any utility in the country. So what does that mean? When there's a main break and there's nothing but frost up here, the gas isn't coming this way, it's going this way. And what it looks for is an opportunity to get into a house. And when it gets in a house, it gets in the house, and gas is in an explosive state when it's somewhere between 5 and 15% natural gas and the rest is air. So anywhere 95% air, 5% natural gas, or 85% air, 15% natural gas, anywhere in that explosive range, that's when a spark can cause a problem. So at PGW, we have to have enough personnel that our leak response is going to be at your house in less than an hour. Now, our goal is 96%. Customarily, we hit 97 to 98% of all of our calls are responded to within that 1 hour time frame. And I got to tell you, 1 hour, we want to be there before that. Most of the time, when you see a PGW vehicle moving at a speed that doesn't look right, I guarantee you, they're not doing that because they want to. They're doing that because they have to. They have to get to that location. And we worry about that gas migrating into that house. So that's one of the roles that we play. We have to be as safe, and we are, as any utility in the state, notwithstanding the fact that we have a lot of desperate people that do desperate things. We get out there and you have a carbonized heater or you have a block flue, that's a very dangerous situation. However, the following winter, people make it through the winter with space heaters and so forth. Somebody else decides, I'm going to turn that heater back on. They put their family in jeopardy. So that's the type of thing that happens here in this city with a lot of folks that really are in a desperate situation. Nobody in this room, including myself, we haven't seen that situation, and we don't see that situation, but it's there. And it's something that's really very important to us. So the replacement of this cast iron is our capital budget's about $110 million a year, and $85 million of it is to replace this aging infrastructure. Our plan to replace it was over 100 years. Now it's 48, and there's no way it's staying at 48. I guarantee you there's no one going to let us stay there. We're going to have to push that down to about 25 years, and the amount of disruption that we are causing in the streets of Philadelphia, we have to consider that. Because we're not the only one in the street. The water department's digging up the street. Verizon's digging up the street. The SEPT is digging up the street. You have reasons that the streets department is in the street in the area. So I live in Northern Liberties. A lot of times it's a maze for me to get away out of my house to work because I've got PGW working here, I've got Verizon here. And I got to tell you, the city's folks do a great job of making sure these permits always give you a way out because you have to get out of that maze. But the point that I'm making is, in order for us to get to this aging infrastructure, most of it's in the older part of town. What's the older part of town? Center City. It's where all your commerce is. It's where all your businesses are. So we work at night, we try to work. At times we get permits where we don't start until the evening. Funny story, we're outside of, back when George Perrier had his restaurant, Lebec Fin. We're out there running a jackhammer. He comes out the door, he's got his garb on from in the kitchen, and he starts really letting it fly. He's very colorful, and he's yelling at our guys. He's saying the plates are jarring off the table and so forth. But the fact of the matter was, it was 7 o'clock at night. That's when we have to get in there and do that work. So we shut the work down at that point, but then we had to get back in and get it done. But it's a situation where no good deed goes unpunished. Probably you use that at your shops or your offices. We find ourselves in that position a lot, but it's a public utility. Our folks understand that, they get it, they know what they're working for, and I get very upset when we get a reaction from our employees of anything but respect for our customers and respect for the public. So there's a huge amount of money being spent for the replacement of our infrastructure, and we have to do that. There's no way we can go forward without it. So that brings me to, okay, let's talk about the finances of the gas works. People are using a lot less gas now. You put a new heater in, your gas bill is going to drop. It's going to get a lot less expensive because new heaters are far more efficient than the 20-year-old unit you have in your property. And as a result of that, when I started at the company, a typical residential heating customer used 120 units of gas. We use the term 1,000 cubic feet. It's MCF. I'm going to call it units for the understandability of it. Typical customer used 120 MCF. Now they use 79. So we recover our costs by that meter spinning. In other words, how much gas goes through that meter, that's how we get paid. And as a result of that, how did we offset that? How did we offset the fact that we've lost a lot of revenues? Well, we do three things. We can raise rates, we can cut costs, or we look for new revenues. Now, we didn't raise rates since 2010. It's the last time we had a rate increase. We have one coming up soon, which is going to make us very unpopular. Second thing we've done is we're always looking for cost reduction. When I started the company, we had 2,850 employees. We now have 1,600, and we always look for efficiencies to reduce that number. We have a residency requirement. We employ Philadelphians. They spend their money here in Philadelphia. There's a lot of collateral implications of the dollars that go on in Philadelphia. A lot of the businesses that we do business with are Philadelphia businesses. We have large underground construction companies that operate right out of Philadelphia. And we use a lot of these companies. But certainly our employees are here in town, their family members are in town. We have about 2,500 retirees. A lot of them are still in town. But we certainly have to find other ways to offset that additional or that reduction in revenues. And the things that we're doing are things that tie directly in line with the greening of our community. If you're a utility and you don't get it by now, that there's a huge national movement towards renewables and a greener society, well, we believe that if you I don't try to get into rooms and try to convince environmentalists that they have to think like I think. What I try to do is get in a room and give them my side of why I think the way I do, and they can make their own judgments. But natural gas is the cleanest burning fossil fuel by a wide margin. And do I want to see a future where there's absolutely no fossil fuels and no emissions? Yeah, I want to see it just like everybody else. And the only difference between myself and an environmentalist is the time that it's going to take to get there. They may think it's 5 years, I may think it's 50. I guarantee you we're both wrong. It's somewhere, and I'm not even going to say it's somewhere in between. It's somewhere. And the fact of the matter is that if we can use natural gas to supplant oil, to supplant coal, to supplant even natural gas that's being used inefficiently, we're cleaning the environment. Now let me drop back on that a little bit. If you have a central generating plant that's south of Philadelphia, and they're using natural gas. They've converted from coal. They've gotten rid of the dirty coal. They're using natural gas to produce electricity. That electricity is coming here to the plug so you can plug your Tesla in. All right, they lose 50% of the energy in that natural gas at the facility and moving it across the wires to that plug. If you're using natural gas in a facility and you're using one of the newer technologies like combined heat and power, like the old Four Seasons, the Logan has it on top of their penthouse. Area Hospital has it. There's numerous entities in the city that use combined heat and power. What they use is they use natural gas to produce steam, electricity, and cooling for their facilities, and they do it with an 80% efficiency rate. So you're using a lot less energy, a lot less natural gas, a lot less emissions to produce a greater amount of energy right at your location. Now, why isn't everybody doing it? Because there's a first cost. There's a cost to it. It's expensive. You know, we're in this game. We're competing against Pico. We're competing against Veolia. We may be a monopoly, but we have plenty of competition. And what we need to do is we need to provide incentive programs, which we do, and things of that sort. But the point I'm making is that Philadelphia Gas Works and the product that we move is a bridge to the future. It's a bridge to that when we start to produce a solar cell that used to be the size of this room and now it's this big and you're getting the same amount of energy out of it. Or we're producing batteries where we can take that solar energy and store it in a battery and we don't have to, we don't have the same problems that we have today. Notwithstanding that batteries use lithium, and lithium is created largely through strip mining, but that's a whole nother story. The fact of the matter is there are ways to use natural gas to supplant great inefficiencies in the way we use energy. And I just named one of them, combined heat and power. But you're going to see microgrids. You're going to see a step away from these central generating facilities, and you're going to see natural gas as a feedstock in a location that produces the energy much more efficiently. And by the way, the prevailing winds are south to north in Philadelphia, so I guarantee you if there's a coal plant south of here, we're getting those emissions here in Philadelphia. So, there's a lot of different arguments that you can make. I just make the argument that natural gas is a big part of the solution. You may notice that in the beginning I talked about producers and pipelines. What Philadelphia Gas Works is, we're what we call an LDC, local distribution company. And that's like New Jersey Natural, South Jersey Gas, Baltimore Gas and Electric, UGI, PECO. We're local distribution companies. Then you have interstate pipelines. Interstate pipelines, they're the companies that actually transport the natural gas. They're regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then you have the producers. So you actually have three components to the natural gas food chain. And at the end of the food chain, where PGW is, we're the ones that have to add the customers. You may, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll take questions. There's a big push in town from the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm part of it. I'm on the Greater Philadelphia Energy Action Team. It's headed up by Phil Rinaldi. Just recently announced his retirement from Philadelphia Energy Solutions. We're trying to develop the capability to have an interstate pipeline expand capability into Philadelphia. And you say to yourself, well, why do you want to do that? Number one, as soon as the fuel source is here, businesses come. The polypropylene business is a big business. A lot of jobs. One of the things that I think about all the time is the Philadelphia School District. How do we make that a better place? I lose employees every day. Maybe I'm exaggerating. I lose employees all the time because they start at the company at age 22, they get married, they have children get to 5 years old, and they say, I don't want to put my kids in the Philadelphia School District. I don't want to do it. I'd rather go out into Cheltenham or Abington or Valley Forge and put my kids in the school districts out there. So I train them, I develop them, I make them, I create an excellent employee, and guess what? They go to PECO because PECO doesn't have a residency. They go to Boeing. They go to one of the refineries. They go to another utility because the school district pushes them out. And that's the main issue. And of course, then they say to me, well, if you didn't have a residency policy, I don't have control over that. We have a residency policy. It is what it is. But the fact of the matter is, since I have a residency policy, people have to live here in Philadelphia. And we know it's a great place to live. We know a lot of people want to live here. The amount of younger people moving into the city is fantastic. But the fact of the matter is, all the businesses in town have to be concerned about the school district, and I am very concerned about it. And if I can bring business here that brings tax dollars, it's going to help create a better situation for the city of Philadelphia, largely in the area of schools and education for children. So that's my agenda. That's my long-term agenda for why I do what I do. But certainly I talk at a rate of about 300 words a minute, and they tell me people absorb at about 200. So anyway, Harris.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.